Dusty, you and I grew up in an era where there was cowboy shows on TV all the time, and I understand you have a very interesting story about the TV show Gunsmoke and how you had to get from point A to point B in what could have been difficult circumstances.
Well, first you're talking about cowboy movies. As a kid, I always sided with the Indians and Native Americans, and even to this day, I spent a lot of time with the Cheyenne tribe in Montana, and my mom used to go to the Navajo Nation Sherman Institute in Riverside, and the kids would come over to play, and but they always had to go home, and I didn't understand why they had to go home. How come they couldn't spend the night? And but my mom was trying to explain it to me, and I was like tired of the Native Americans losing. I'm like, man, I'll be the Indian today. But anyway, I got an interesting story. When I was in A-ball, when I signed, I was with the Greenwood Braves, and Bob Didier was one of my teammates, and so all the blacks and Latins, we had to live behind Mama's soul food kitchen. Mama used to cook for us every day. We had like a little cubicle. My teammate, I was always the youngest from the beginning, but my teammate Al Thompson was my roommate, and so I liked Gunsmoke, and so all the black and Latin players, we couldn't live in a house or with host families. So Bob Didier is one of my teammates. He's from the South, one of the coolest dudes. He's from Louisiana. And so he said, hey man, come over and watch TV at our house, at my host family. So I'd go over there. The only thing is I'd leave at 9 o'clock. I had to leave at 8:45. And all the blacks are supposed to be off the street at 9 o'clock. And it would take me 15 minutes to get back to the house, but you couldn't be running down the street because it looked like you stole something. So I had to leave. I never saw the end of Gunsmoke. And I remember I came in and Al Thompson, was seeing a young lady, Chief Police's daughter. And and he was black and Chief Police was white, his daughter was white. And then Bob Conley, he's from Oakland, and he was seeing this fine sister named Mary Ann. And so they'd go on a date and they'd swap. Well, both of them got released because at that time, blacks and whites didn't room together. The only time you would get a single room is if there was an odd number of blacks and Latins. Then you got a single room. And so I came in one day and they had released Thompson, Al, and Conley both. And so I was sad, man. That was my roommate for a couple weeks, and then I went back to the room, and all of a sudden there was a knock on the door, but it didn't sound like a knock. And so I peeked out the louvers. There's one way in, one way out, and there was a chief police, and he was drunk, and he was knocking on the door with his pistol. And so I went in the bathroom, and I had to slide down in between the window and, there were louver windows. So, I thought I was pretty smart. So he couldn't shoot down in the, and so then Mama, she ran out. And I always had a mama in every town I played in. There was somebody that wanted to make me their son. And Mama came out, and, the old black ladies back in them days, if they wanted to hit you upside the head, they brought a broom with them. So she had that broom, and she ran the chief police off. And then as soon as he got away from that room, this is 1968, I went around the backside, where the Latin players were. And that's why, to this day, I always had a special spot in my heart, for the Latin players. And then my mom made me speak Spanish, and which I hated. But then I really, really, appreciated, once I got into Pro Bowl.
And there's dozens of Gunsmoke episodes you never saw the last 10 minutes.
No, I never saw the last sentence, but I figured, Matt Dillon was going to win anyway because he'd always show up the next week.
Tell me this, I was curious, I know you and I talked about this a lot, that you had a great relationship with your dad.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that he taught you, he told you a lot about inner dignity and outer dignity.
Well, like he would tell me, because I asked my dad, I said, Dad, how do you take stuff from these people? You know what I mean? And I remember, my dad's second job was cutting lawns, and I was always with him being the oldest. And there was this one kid who told me to go over and pick up that paper. And I said, hey man, look, don't you talk to me like that. And my dad, he would never let me, he'd cut lawns, but he wouldn't let me shine shoes. He wouldn't let me do caddy at the country club, certain things that he wouldn't let me do. That was, a lot of people thought was synonymous to our race that you had to do. And so I asked my dad, so why won't you let me do any of this stuff? You're doing it, you know what I mean? He says, well, there's outer dignity and inner dignity. I said, what are you talking about? And he said, outer dignity is what you have to do to keep this job. Just like my dad told me, go and pick up that paper. And that kid told me, that's an example of outer dignity, what you have to do to kind of keep your job, to feed the family. But he said, when you get to school on Monday, he says, you and him are supposed to be, I was in 4th or 5th grade, you and him are supposed to be playing flag, but you run over him like you're playing tackle. And so I ran over him, and then he went and told the teacher, oh, Dusty's playing tackle. And then the teacher knew that he was messing with me. He said, oh yeah, that's okay, no, Dusty wouldn't do that. And I was like, okay, that taught me how to get back. But my dad said that the inner dignity, where no man, has the right to tread. It's like, hey, damn this job, you can keep it. You do what you got to do with me, and then you got to trust God to take care of you, which is the reason why a few times, I've lost a couple jobs as a manager because they treaded on my inner dignity. And they may not even know they did, but they certainly did, and I had to trust God. I mean, you talk about me and my dad's relationship. See, there was a time, my mom and dad got divorced when I was going to my halfway my senior year, and my dad was my coach, and he was my little league coach. He was Bobby Bond's little league coach in Riverside. My dad was everybody's coach because my dad had a bad leg that he hurt during the war. And so, well, before that, my dad cut me from his little league team when I was 8, 9, and 10 because he said I had a bad attitude and I had a bad temper, which I did. And my dad cut me. I had to pay for his friend. And so he says, if you can take that bad attitude one day and put it in a positive direction, that you can be something someday. And Bobby Bonds, I mean, everybody wanted to be Bobby Bonds. He was the baddest dude in our town, other than his sister, Rosie, because Rosie went to the Olympics, and then Bobby's older brother, Robert, he played for the Kansas City Chiefs. I mean, their family was something. And, we moved to Sacramento, and then, the economic spokes were off on the wheel, so I was oldest of 5, and then my dad wanted me to go to Santa Clara, play basketball, and I didn't want to go to another all-white school because I was the only black dude in my high school my last 2 years. No, I wasn't the only. There was 2, me and my brother. And but it was, I learned a lot about how to get along with people, or how to, size somebody up, or also, how to fight. You know what I mean? And so, all this kind of came, with the territory. And my dad would always get on me about fighting, and he'd always say, what would Jackie Robinson do? All the time. I got so tired of hearing that. But he was telling the truth, and he gave me that speech again about inner dignity and outer dignity, and you get them on the football field, basketball, baseball. I went to state track meet. I mean, I wanted to, be a player. And so when my dad had signed me to go to Santa Clara, I didn't want to go to Santa Clara because it was another all-white school, basically. And I wanted to go to San Jose State or Arizona State, where I could get in with the C and carry a C average and then party and have a good time. And my dad's like, oh, no, boy, those are 1-2 party schools in the country. And I'm like, my dad's a Baptist deacon. I'm like, Dad, how you know? Because I saw they were the 1-2 party schools over one of my friend's house, who his father took Playboy magazine. I wasn't looking at them naked girls. I was just looking at the whatever they call it, the reporter or whatever they saw. Yeah, the interview. So I I feel like asking my dad, man, how you know? 'Cause that's the 1-2 party school in the country. Were you looking at Playboy magazine? But I didn't have guts enough there. So me and my mom, you know, like I said, the economic wheel was off the, you know, spokes are off the wheel. So they flew me to L.A. I was 25th round draft choice, and then I met Hank Aaron. Hank Aaron promised my mom that if I had enough confidence to sign, and by the time my team would have graduated, I mean my class would have graduated from college, then sign. If not, then you go to college. And so, you know, confidence was never my problem. So I signed, and then when I came back home, you know, my dad, I mean, he was furious, and so he took my contract to court, and so that's when Vietnam was hot, so I had to go to school in the wintertime to junior college because you had to carry 18 units per semester, or else you were drafted to go to Vietnam. This is 1967, 68. This Vietnam was hot, and this was when everything was anti-this or nonconformity to this or that, and Berkeley was hot, and which was right close to us, and that's where my dad didn't want me to hang out in Berkeley because, you know, Angela Davis, H. Rap Brown, Sin Q, I mean, the Panthers, and my dad knew that I was easily influenced, and not only easily influenced, I felt kind of the same way.
Felt kinship.
Yeah, you know, that was happening. And so, anyway, my dad took my contract to court as me and my mom, and on one side with our lawyer, my dad trying to nullify my contract. So my dad, we didn't speak for 3 years, so I used to like take my brothers and sisters over to my dad's house and drop them off, and I wouldn't even go inside because I was like so mad because, you know, that famous speech that my daughter told me and my son, you know, I'm grown now, I'm 18 years old, I'm independent, even though you ain't paying for nothing, even though you ain't doing a damn thing. That's a famous speech by many young people. So anyway, I couldn't spend my money, and they invoked the Jackie Coogan child prodigy law. Jackie Coogan was a child actor, and to stop people from spending their money till then they're 18 to 21, and then they're broke, and should have a bunch of money. So then they invested my money in Standard Oil of California, and which is now Chevron, and also IBM stock, and then my money like tripled. And then, that's when I started watching stock market, which later on I ended up being a stockbroker because I was interested in that, finance world. So, I kind of feel like in my life that I've been like chosen to do these things. I was with the Dodgers, and then they wanted me to play Jackie Robinson's story. The sorta had picked me to play Jackie Robinson's story, and never came off. So I took some acting lessons, and then when I was in L.A.
Could you pull it off?
Yeah. What kind of question is that? I told my wife, I said, look, I was gonna do like some love scenes, and then she goes, you ain't doing no love scenes. Yeah, like take 22. One more time.
That would have been something.
Sure would have been. Yeah.
The reason I asked if you had met Mr. Robinson, because our friend Joe Morgan said the first time he met him, he got tongue-tied, and all he said was, thank you. Mr. Robinson said, you're welcome.
Yeah, well, see, I saw every Jackie, because my dad was a big Jackie Robinson fan. Most African Americans were Dodger fans, Brooklyn Dodger fans, and LA Dodger fans because of Jackie Robinson. And, like I said, my dad, we watched every Jackie Robinson movie, Jackie Robinson, All-American, Jackie Robinson, the court martial of Jackie Robinson, you know what I mean? And the Jackie Robinson story. And then I felt like very, very, I even went to take some acting lessons because the sorta recommended that I play Jackie Robinson's story that never got off the ground. But I felt that was like,
That'd have been a real calling.
Yeah, that was, but,
So let me ask you another guy. I remember the first time we met, and I think I asked you something about this years ago, the influence that Mr. Aaron and Hank Aaron had on you. What the first thing you remember about, like his biggest impact
Well, he told my, well, biggest impact, he told my mother he'd take care of me as if I was his son.
All right, so which is huge.
Yeah, that's what he told me. He told my mom that. So I was go over his house all the time, me and Ralph Gar. You know, I mean, I was always with Ralph. And Ralph helped me deal with being in the South because I was I didn't thought I'd take no stuff, but see, I was lucky I didn't get my head beat in a couple times because you know you call me a boy, then hey man, you know we got to go, and then it's like, but that was I found out later, but they called everybody boy, white and black in the South, you know what I mean? And so, but I took exception to different things, and Hank, I could go to Hank if I had a problem, just like when I was in West Palm Beach here, it's different. Now I can rent a house here where before we had to live with host families again in West Palm Beach. And then, you know, I remember one time I was in a pool hall with some Latin dudes and Mike McQueen, the white dude pitcher, cool dude from Texas. And we were playing pool and I was speaking Spanish and then I started speaking English and then this lady came over to me. She goes, "Where are you from?" And I said, "California." She said, "Look, if we didn't serve Maury Wills, we ain't serving you." And I was like, "Well, Maury Wills is a light-skinned brother." And so, but as long as they were speaking Spanish, they could be black as coal, and it was accepted. And I remember I was going to turn over the pool table, but it was bolted to the ground. So I was so embarrassed, I couldn't even turn over the pool table. And then I ran back to the hotel, which is right there when I go down Palm Beach Lakes Boulevard by that cone-looking building down there. And I ran to Hank's room. And then Hank, you know, called NAACP that I went to, and we had and Hank's brother-in-law at the time was Mr. Lucas, Bill Lucas.
Yep.
And there was Bob and Bill. Bill was closer to my age. He was like 4 or 5 years older than me. But Mr. Lucas, you know, I mean, I was surrounded by a lot of good people, black and white, but especially black people that took care of me away from home and make sure that I do the right thing, make sure that I go to church, make sure that I ate right. Because, you know, when you're 18, man, you got a little paper in your pocket and you got a pretty little car. I mean, you can get beside yourself. And now, I mean, not only beside yourself, the organization really, until recently, the last few years, they didn't care what you did when you got away from the game. You know what I mean? As long as you showed up to work on time, you could have been hanging out, because this is how it was for me in all the towns that I played in. You know, my passes were, you know, the pimps and the hustlers and the numbers guys and stuff, because this is where we had to stay and where we had to live. I had never been exposed to that kind of life, but it was kind of exciting, you know, on one hand. And if you don't want me to come live over here, then I gotta go live over there, you know. So it was, you know, it was. I've been through quite a bit of stuff, but like I said, I was chosen to be through this. And a lot of times that I was also, I've had some guardian angels where I could have really got in trouble, or I could have really been killed.
In terms of baseball-wise, particular item that you got from Hank Aaron that also kept you on the straight and narrow? Was there anything like how to play the game?
Yeah. Well, you know what Hank gave us? I mean, he gave us focus and concentration. And this guy, he gave us hard work, because to watch him, and I use this to this day, you hope that your best player is your best citizen at the same time. And this is what, and Hank was externally humble, but internally super confident. But you never heard him say anything, brag on himself. I never heard him say anything. Like, you know me, if I was Hank Aaron, I'm like, man, I am bad. You know what I mean? I ain't never.
Right?
Oh yeah, I've never heard him say that. And he used to and he worked hard. I mean, he worked hard. He was the first guy that was big on nutrition. You know, like he made us eat our big meal at 1 o'clock, and if you ate closer to 3, you had to eat pasta or chicken or something that you could digest. And he also taught us how to play in pain, you know, and because this guy would come limp in like Fred Sanford and then run out on the field like Bob Hayes and then limp back in after the game. And, you know, he had a bad back, he had a sciatic nerve. I mean, you know, like he would tell us about making adjustments. I mean, when I first came up, I had to hit behind Hank. And, he would tell me different things, like he was chasing Tom Seaver, make him get the ball down. If you're facing Steve Carlton, if it's spinning from the hips down, take it, because it's going to be a ball. And he had a theory and a philosophy on how to play, how to pitch, how to face everybody, and he also had a theory and philosophy on how to play. He didn't have these printouts. I mean, he could tell how you held your hands if you want the ball down, up, or if it's out, you're going to pull the ball. If it's in here, you're going to hit the ball that way. I mean, he paid attention, and the thing that he hated cheaters more than anybody. And he hated people that would load the ball up, because if you couldn't get him out on your own, then don't be cheating. And, I mean, if you needed a base stolen, he'd steal it. I mean, he would school me. I didn't know he was schooling me. He's like, boy, you understand? I said, oh, yes, sir, I understood everything. I didn't understand nothing. So he's like, listen, here's the key. You may not understand, but you retain it. And whatever you do, because someday that this may come back on you. And I tell my guys this. I learned so many lessons. They probably get tired of me talking about Hank Aaron, but I mean, this guy was, he was on it. And I remember one day he told me to watch the shortstop move, like right before the pitch, and I saw it was Ozzie Smith. He moved, boom, and he threw me a breaking ball. And I was like, I knew it was coming. And that's why I don't buy this like they tell people that, oh yeah, at 32, you're over the hill or whatever. No, at 32 to 36, Al Campanis told me that's when you're at your best, because your mind and your body, as long as you don't get hurt, as long as you don't get fat in the mix session, can rotate. Man, you're playing with all underclassmen, and damn near what's coming every pitch. And like, that's how Hank was, that's how Willie was, that's how Joe Morgan was, that's how Pete Rose were, or Willie McCovey Jr., all these cats, man, that if you can make it to that point and you still love the game, and you still, the money hadn't gotten so big that you ceased to love the game, or you haven't gotten fatter, or more importantly, sometimes you get tired of pain. If you play for the longest, like Sandy Koufax, he got tired of pain, you know what I mean? And sometimes, you get tired of hurting, and, you got to love this game. And, this is a heck of a game. I didn't think I'd be in this game this long. I certainly didn't want to be a coach. That's the last thing I want to do was coach.
Why?
Because I got skinny legs, I don't wear shorts, and I don't wear a whistle around my neck. Because, most minority guys, when they get out of the game, they're not happy, because most of us feel that you've been mistreated along the way somewhere, and then when you get out the game, you're discarded and not really wanted, as far as coaching, as far as PR jobs, as far as anything in the organization.
You were such an exception to that. Longevity is a
Well, like I said, I'm chosen. I don't know why I'm chosen. I have no idea. I don't even deserve to be in this position a lot of times, but sometimes it goes back to what my dad told me about picking your battles, and about inner dignity and outer dignity. You know what I mean? And that's all I can think about as to why, my longevity, or think about my military service. I was in the military from 69 to 75, and the reason why I joined the Marines is because the Braves got tired of me missing. I'd lead the team in hitting, but I wouldn't have enough at bats, because I'd come out, so we wouldn't go to Vietnam, and then I could have joined the National Guard, but I didn't want to join the National Guard because they were getting called out on riots. And so that's why, I joined the Marines, and one of the things that I'm most proudest about, I was dressed blue honor man out of boot camp, and then, 4 or 5 years ago, I was chosen to be in the Marine Corps Hall of Fame, Sports Hall of Fame. You know what I mean? So it's like, I learned some valuable lessons.
Well, having said all that, but not want to get into that. Here you are, 13 wins away from 2,000. 5 teams, playoffs, and a couple World Series. You're a shining example for a lot of guys, and I know having grown up watching you play and everything, I was like, this means a lot to me. And I just find it's extraordinary what an example you are. I mean, well, like you idolize Hank and Robinson and everything. I mean, a lot of cats look up
Oh
to
yeah,
you now.
Frank, Joe Morgan. Yeah, exactly. That's what Jerry Manuel just told me. My homeboy from Sacramento. He just told me that before I left. Ralph Garr reminds me of that all the time. But I mean, why is it only me? I'm not the only one that should be in this position. You know what I mean? And people like, oh yeah, you took 5 teams to the championships. I'm not really proud of that. Why shouldn't it be 2? You know what I mean? There were times when we won 95 and 97 games and it wasn't good enough, and then I'm fired. Nobody even gave me a reason. But my mom used to tell me too. You got to persevere, son. You know what I mean? And perseverance, brings character. Character brings hope, and then hope brings about an outcome and example for others, which I'm hoping, for me not to just be the last. Me and Dave Roberts. It's terrible. It's pitiful to me. You want to know the truth?
I hear you. Let me switch gears. I saw your son here, Darren, and I think of the top of the stadium replay of JT Snow rescuing him at home plate during the World Series in '02.
Mm-hmm.
And now he's with you and trying to get the Pro Bowl. But take me back to that moment when everything was happening like lickety split. What do you remember about that?
Well, you know what happened. People don't realize that the reason why he was there. He was 3 years old, and I had cancer, prostate cancer, that winter, and the winter of 2001. And so I had an operation. I barely got spring training, like 3 days, cleared by the doctor. And I said, man, and anybody who's had cancer, probably the most traumatic times of the year is when you go in for your 3-month checkup or 6-month checkup, and then, the doctor says, I'll call you back in a week. And I'm like, no, you won't. You call me back today or tomorrow. And, you don't know if that cancer's ever going to come back. I mean, it's 20 years for me now. And, I said, I'm going to give my son everything I can give him, because this is my only son. I had a daughter, a lovely daughter, who just gave me my second grandson last Saturday. And so I said, and then I always believed in having those kids around. Had Barry's kid, Sean Dunstan's kid. I mean, whoever had a son had a kid, man, let him be the bat boy. Because, you see all the Boones, you see all the actors, the Sutherlands, the Milo Estevez, and all those guys. I mean, and those kids are not intimidated by anything because they've been on the set since they was this high. The same for these kids. And so my son, that day, he was Kenny Lofton's designated guy to get his bat. Because my son used to ask me, Dad, what do? You don't do nothing but just sit there. The other guys, they play. And I'm like, hey, I do a lot. What are you talking about? So now there was a new kid in the dugout. We didn't know him. Upstairs had brought in some outside kid. So this kid tells my son, I'm going to get Kenny Lofton's bat. And my son goes, no, you're not. He was competitive back then. And all he wanted to do was play ball. He'd slide at the Safeway, slide in the airport. I mean, this boy's sliding everywhere around. And so my mom had told me that day, she said, look, I don't think Darren should be the bat boy. I said, Mom, he's done this 100 times, no problem. Listen to me. So now when he steps out to beat this other kid, I could see it now. My mom was going to call me. So right after the game, I got in my office. The phone rang. Bling. I said, oh, boy. Pick it up. Dusty. I said, hey, Mom. When my name was Dusty, but when there's Dusty, you in trouble. I said, what's up, Mom? You don't listen to me. I said, Mom, I got to go. I said, the press is coming in. I don't care. You tell them to wait. You don't listen to me. When are you going to ever start listening to me? And then, I was just glad that, and see, he doesn't even remember I mean, to this day, and people remember him for that. I said, son, maybe you were destined. You know what I mean? I mean, to be in this position because all they want to do is just, I mean, play ball.
Wow.
Yeah.
Hey, can't hang up with mom now.
No. I didn't hang up. You crazy?
2,000 wins.
2,000 wins?
Yeah. Pantheon number.
I'm trying not to make it too big because I got to go way past 2,000. And in my mind, if I should have been at 2,000 if I hadn't got fired like 3 different times. I was out of the game 6 years, man. That cost me a bunch of money, cost me a bunch of wins, and it cost me. But on the other hand, those 3 times 6 that I was out, I got to see my daughter married in my backyard in front of the tree. She always got married. I got to see my son graduate from high school. I got to see, bury my dad. I got to go to Hawaii. I'm not Hawaii. I got to go to Alaska, where I always wanted to go since I was a kid when my mother talked my dad into letting me spend that $1.25 to get National Geographic because I had this Field and Stream, love the fishing. I had Sports Illustrated. I just knew I was going to be on the cover, which I haven't been on there yet, and National Geographic. Nah, man, I ain't do enough to get on the cover yet. I had a couple articles in there, but that's okay. It's all good.
I always like asking managers this, with your length of service,
Mm-hmm.
favorite players you managed and favorite managers you played for.
Well, favorite managers, most of my favorite guys that I played for were really coaches, like Tom Lasorda was one of my favorite managers because he helped save my career. I had favorite coaches more than anybody because the coaches are like your uncles. You can tell them anything. Your manager's like your dad. You can tell him most stuff, but you can't tell him everything. And I had Jim Gilliam, who I could tell everything to, Preston Gomez, Danny Ozark. These guys were outstanding where I could talk to them. And
What kind of stuff you talk about with that?
anything. I would talk about anything, and that's why I always like a diversified staff because you got to have somebody that you can talk to. Somebody that you trust that won't run tell what you're going to tell them your deepest, darkest secrets. And I was a coach once for like 5 years, and
You were that guy?
I was that guy. You know what I mean? And so, they can almost tell, but I tell them now, hey man, you got to go talk to somebody. You don't have to talk to me, but I got such a diversified staff here and that's what I learned in the Marines. You need some Southern country white dudes, somebody to talk to. You need some Latins, you need some blacks, you need some city boys, you need some country boys. You got to have
You're the king of DEI.
yeah. Hey man, you got
Equity and inclusion.
yeah. You got to have somebody that you can talk to.
What about favorite players?
Favorite players, I got a bunch of them. Damn near all of them. I'm serious for different reasons. Robbie Thompson, Ellis Burks, Jeff Kent, Barry Bonds, Darren Lewis, D. Lou. I named my son after D. Lou. Royce Clayton, D. Lee, Ramos Ramirez, Kenny Lofton. I had some dudes, man. Burke, Billy Swift. Like I said, I had a whole bunch of them. Joey Votto. They were so nice to my son. Jay Bruce. Guys that were, Richard Ray. I remember one time he told me, he said, "Hey man, thanks for, what you did for me and my family." And I remember reading a story about Vince Lombardi. It says that that what made him happy was to see his players and their families, economically independent and leave the game with something, and their sons and daughters and whatever, to be happy in life.
You mentioned Burke. Is that Glenn Burke you're talking about?
Yeah, well, Glenn, oh yeah, well that's one of my favorite teammates. But I was talking to John Burkett. You know.
Okay, John Burkett.
Yeah.
Defensive right hand.
Yeah, that's the team that I was the uncle that turned to the father.
Yeah.
Because I was 92, I was batting coach. No, then I just turned the manager. So I had this bowling shirt. He was a big bowler. I said, Berkey. He says, man, I want that shirt. I said, well, I'll give you this shirt. So you win 15 games, I'll give you this shirt. I'll put it in my closet because they had a bowling bag all the way across my chest. I said, I'll put it in my closet. You win 15 games, I'll give you this shirt. On 14. He goes, man, I want the shirt. It's not that you can't have it. You didn't win 15. You win 14. I said, I'll leave it in the closet. I said, how many you gonna win next year? 20. 20, damn it. Won 21.
No way.
Yeah.
Gladly gave it to us, right?
Well, hey man, if you're gonna say you're gonna do something and you give me a goal, dude.
There you go. Glenn Burke, I remember that whole story. Him coming out as gay. What was the temperature in the clubhouse and all that? How was that received?
Temperature wasn't good. You know, I mean, he was like my son, especially like to me and Davey and Reggie and Reggie Smith. And I got to tell people he was the second best player I ever played with. He was a bad man. Right. And so my first wife had a friend who was gay, and so we went over her house for lunch in Houston, and so she says, "You got any gays in baseball?" I said, "Nah, we got no gays in baseball." She says, "You got any gays on your team?" I said, "No, I told you we didn't have no gays on the." So he goes use the bathroom. So she says, "That boy in there is gay." So who? She goes, "Him right there." So then, it's like, then I start seeing some signs, and finally, like I said, we had a pretty big discussion. I was like, and then they traded him. They traded him for Billy North. And then he came to see me when I was a manager, and he said the Sport Magazine was going to call him. They called me. They said, "Hey man, Glenn Burke's coming out of the closet." I said, "What closet are you talking about?" I'm dummying up on him. And he says, "Yeah, man, he's going to come out and say he's gay." I said, "Well, give me Glenn's number," because I had lost contact with him for a couple of years there, because he had won the 100, 220, the gay Olympics and stuff. This cat was a mega athlete, and all the brothers up around Berkeley and Oakland and Richmond, man, guys were like, "Nah, man," because that was big news. Yeah, and then Glenn, he said, "Johnny B, I'm coming out the closet." I said, "What do you want me to tell him?" He said, "You tell him whatever you want to tell him." I said, "Okay, man." So I told him what I knew, because he was getting paid. And then I think at the time he was HIV, and then he ended up real skinny, coming down to the stadium to see me, and I didn't even recognize him. Then that's when I joined. I just take my daughter and go feed guys with HIV, and girls with HIV, and I forget the name of the organization, but anyway, I was with the Giants, and people couldn't understand why I did what I did, but I felt the need to have to do it because of Glenn. I mean, just like I feed the homeless now, because of my brother. He was a manic depressant. He died like 3 years ago. He's a manic depressant, double masters, certified wills, trust, taxes, and he was, like he had a nervous breakdown, and he was diagnosed with manic depressant with schizoaffective tendencies, and so he was homeless. And so it's like, like I said, I didn't ask to be in this position, but I was chosen to be in this
You're right
position.
in the right position, just like you are right now.
Yeah, the same. Yeah.
The good side of the better side of that Glenn Burke story, you guys are credited for starting a high five.
Mm-hmm.
What do you remember about that?
Hey man, he just threw his hand up and I threw it up. I didn't do no high five. Everybody asked me, "Oh, did you do the high five? You invented the high five?" No, Glenn invented the high five. I was just a bigger name because I'd hit my 30th home run off of my nemesis, J.R. Richard.
Ooh,
Yeah, that's my partner too, man. He strike me out like 3 times and then come around the Astrodome and come pick me up in his Mercedes and say, "Get in, man. We going to the club." I'm like, "Man, I don't want to go to the club. Get out of here." He said, "Get in the car, man. The game's over." I like, "It's over for you." It wasn't over for me because I was still mad about them 3 punch outs, you know.
How'd you do against Gibby?
Not good, because Hank Aaron. No, first we went to. We were in St. Pete, and so we came in on the bus, and the Mets and the Cardinals trained together in St. Pete. So they had a game that night. So Hank goes, "Hey man, you want to go to the game with us? With me? You know." And afterwards we're gonna go out with Hoot. He called him Hoot. So, "Oh man, you really?" I said, "Yeah." So this is probably 69, 70. Yeah, and I had just seen him strike out like 18 Tigers the year before. And I was like, "Yeah, man." So now we go after the game, and he hits John Milner in the ribs. So Hank says, "Man, why'd you hit that?" You know, and his nickname was the Hammer because he's from Atlanta. That was my partner. We played with the Mets. And so he goes, "Man, why'd you hit that boy in the ribs?" He said, "'Cause I heard he could hit." So I got real quiet then. I was like, "Well, what do you hear about me?" Because I out-hit him by 20 points. So I was like, man, I'd be quiet as a church mouse. Because see, Hank told me, he goes, "Look, if you keep facing him Hoot," he said, "don't dig in because he don't like that." I said, "Okay." He said, "Don't bunt on him because he don't like that either." I said, "Okay." He said, "Well, don't run back up the middle because he don't like that either. And if you happen to hit a homer off him, you go around the bases, don't go too fast, don't go too slow. And then you go in the dugout, and then if you're going to celebrate, you go up in the tunnel and don't let him see you." And he goes, "Oh, I forgot one thing. If he hits you, don't charge him out because he's a Golden Glove boxer." You know what I did there. And I had a 0 for 4 or 5. No, it was probably 0 for 4. Nobody came up 5 unless it was Ralph. And the only guy that could hit Bob Gibson, he never throw at him, was Darrell Evans. And that's the only, well, him and Hank. So
Your friend Kenny, I heard there's a very interesting.
Kenny?
Yeah, good friend Kenny.
Oh yeah, cool Kenny. We grew up together since 2nd grade, and he's still my partner. You know, a lot of my friends are long time partners.
Yeah.
And Kenny, we went to elementary school together, and I used to like, that's why I talk kind of slow now, because I had to go to speech impediment class in the 6th grade. I was a stutterer. And so Kenny'd wait for me after school, after I went to the class. And he'd be like, as soon as I walk out, man, I hadn't stuttered in 30 minutes. As soon as I walk out, he's like, "What'd you learn?" And I start stuttering all over again. Oh, Lord.
You met Jimi Hendrix. I remember.
Oh, yeah.
Tell that story again about how you met. You were walking down the street and saw Jimi Hendrix across the street.
Yeah, well, first my mom, when I graduated from high school, my mom let me and my buddy use a Rambler station wagon and gave us $20 a piece. And then we went down to Monterey Pop Festival. This is 1967. Oh, yeah. And so that's when I first saw Hendrix, and I think Joplin might have been there, Mamas and Papas, T-Bone Walker. And so I start digging Hendrix. And so then, you know, that was a sign of time of peace and love. So we was going to the Hendrix concert in Winterland. We used to go to every weekend. You know, we saw them all. We saw, I mean, you name it, Spirit. And Spirit played with Ike and Tina Turner Review. I mean, Paul Miller Blues Band. I mean, you name them, we saw them. And so Hendrix was across the street. So my buddies, there's 4 of us. My buddy goes, "Man, why don't you go talk to him?" And, you know, they were white dudes that I went to school with. And he says, I said, "No, man, you go talk to him." I said, "You go talk to him." So, you know, they said, "Offer him a joint." I said, "Really?" So he's like, "Yeah, oh yeah, brother." And I was like, man, I mean, for days I was like, and to this day, you know, I love Hendrix. And so I saw him at Sac State. You know, then we used to go to Freeborn Hall in Davis, and we saw, like I said, I saw Bob Marley, one of his last concerts, and I saw we just go to concerts.
Hendrix is your guy, right?
Yeah, but I like the blues too, and because of my dad, I like jazz. Because on my wall, I got like Thelonious Monk. I got like Miles. Oh, that's my dad's favorite, which I didn't even understand how you like Miles until I got older, and you know like. Coltrane, he's on my wall. John Lee Hooker's on my wall. And I got John Lee Hooker's guitar. I started collecting his guitar. I got John Lee Hooker. I got Santana. I got BB. I got the Stones. They all signed him. I got Tom Petty. No, Tom Petty. You know, who else I got? Buddy Guy. That was my partner in Atlanta. Yeah, so it's like, you know, I was talking to one of the guys in the crew here that musicians want to be athletes, and athletes want to be, you know, musicians.